The gunshot echoed through the pine-covered mountains like thunder, and Nora Ramsey knew in that instant her life would never be the same. She had been running for 3 days, ever since she witnessed what she should never have seen in that mining camp outside Virginia City, Nevada. The men chasing her were part of a gang that controlled half the silver operations in the territory, and they wanted her dead for knowing their secret about the missing payroll. Her horse had gone lame 2 days ago, forcing her to continue on foot through the rugged Sierra Nevada wilderness. The year was 1878, and a woman alone in these mountains had few options and even fewer friends. Nora pressed herself against the rough bark of a ponderosa pine, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her lungs. The 6 men had been closing in all morning, their shouts getting closer with each passing hour. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and had been working as a bookkeeper at the mining office to support herself after her parents died of fever the previous winter. She never imagined that discovering discrepancies in the ledgers would lead to this desperate fight for survival. The sound of breaking branches told her they were less than 100 yards away now. She could hear their voices clearly, rough and angry, promising terrible things when they caught her. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins days ago, hanging in tangled waves around her face. Her dress was torn and mud-stained, her boots nearly worn through. She had no weapon, no food, and no strength left to run. That was when she saw him. He appeared so silently she almost screamed, thinking he was one of her pursuers. But something in his eyes stopped her, a calm steadiness that seemed out of place in this moment of panic. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn denim and a brown leather vest, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. A revolver hung at each hip, and he carried a rifle with the ease of someone who knew how to use it well. His jaw was strong and covered with several days of stubble, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. "Stay quiet and stay down," he said in a low voice that somehow commanded instant obedience. "Whatever happens, do not move from this spot until I come back for you." Before Nora could respond, he was gone, moving through the forest with the silent grace of a mountain lion. She crouched behind the tree, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Then the shooting started. The sound was explosive and terrifying. 4 shots in rapid succession, then silence, then shouting. Nora heard men screaming, heard the thunder of horses being ridden hard in retreat. Then nothing but the wind moving through the pine needles and her own frantic breathing. She did not know how long she waited before he returned. It felt like an eternity, but the sun had barely moved in the sky. When he appeared again, walking calmly through the trees as if he had just been out for a morning stroll, she noticed his expression had not changed at all. "4 of them will not be troubling anyone anymore," he said matter-of-factly. "The other 2 are riding hard back toward Nevada with a message burned into their memories. They will tell their boss that anyone else who comes after you will meet the same fate, and worse." Nora tried to stand but found her legs would not support her. She sank back down, suddenly shaking all over as the fear and exhaustion of the past 3 days caught up with her all at once. The stranger moved quickly, catching her before she could fall completely. His hands were strong but surprisingly gentle as he helped her sit against the tree trunk. "When did you last eat?" he asked, already reaching into his saddlebag. She had not even noticed the beautiful chestnut mare standing nearby, waiting patiently. "I do not remember," Nora admitted. 2 days ago, maybe. Some berries." He handed her dried meat and hardtack, along with a canteen of cool water. She wanted to be polite and eat slowly, but hunger overtook manners and she devoured the food while he watched with something that might have been approval in his eyes. "My name is Zachariah Jenkins," he said when she finally slowed down. "Most people call me Zach. I have a cabin about 5 miles from here, closer to Independence. You will be safe there while we figure out what to do about your situation." "How did you know I needed help?" Nora asked, finding her voice at last. "How did you find me?" "I have been tracking those men for 2 days," Zach replied, his expression hardening slightly. "They passed through my territory making noise and disturbing my traps. When I saw they were chasing someone, I decided to investigate. When I realized that someone was a woman alone, I decided to intervene." "You killed 4 men for a stranger." His gray eyes met hers steadily. "I killed 4 men who were hunting an unarmed woman like she was an animal. There is a difference. And I let 2 live to carry a warning, which is more mercy than they would have shown you." Nora felt tears sting her eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not even know how to properly thank you. You saved my life." "You can thank me by getting strong enough to tell me the whole story," Zach said, standing and offering her his hand. "Right now, we need to move. Those 2 might come back with reinforcements, though I doubt it. Men like that are cowards at heart." He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her with easy grace. Nora had never been this close to a man who was not family, and she was acutely aware of his solid presence at her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. She could feel the warmth of him even through her torn dress, and it made her feel safer than she had in days. They rode through the mountain forest in silence, the only sounds the steady clip of the horse's hooves and the occasional call of a bird. The terrain was rugged and beautiful, with towering pines and glimpses of snow-capped peaks in the distance. Nora had never been this deep into the wilderness before, and despite everything she had been through, she found herself struck by the raw beauty of it all. Zach's cabin appeared suddenly in a clearing, built solidly from logs with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. It was larger than she expected, well-maintained and clearly the home of someone who took pride in their work. A small barn stood nearby, and she could see a vegetable garden and what looked like several trap lines stretching into the woods. "You live out here alone?" she asked as he helped her down from the horse. "I prefer solitude to crowds," Zach replied. "Towns make me restless. Out here, a man can think clearly and live by his own rules." He led her inside, and Nora was surprised again by how well kept everything was. The main room held a stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and even a bookshelf lined with volumes that looked well read. A bedroom was visible through an open doorway, and she could see another door that must lead to a storage area or second room. "You will take the bedroom," Zach said, already moving to build up the fire. "I will sleep out here. First thing, though, you need rest." "Real rest, not running terrified through the mountains. We can talk when you wake up." Nora wanted to protest, to tell him she could not take his bed, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She nodded gratefully and stumbled toward the bedroom. The last thing she remembered was sinking onto the simple but clean bed, covered with quilts that smelled like pine and wood smoke, before sleep claimed her completely. When she woke, the room was dark, and she had no idea how long she had been asleep. Panic gripped her for a moment before she remembered where she was and why. The events of the past few days came rushing back, along with the memory of the tall, quiet man who had saved her life. Nora sat up slowly, her body aching in places she did not know could ache. She could see light coming from under the door and could smell something wonderful cooking. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that dried meat and hardtack were not much of a meal. She stood and tried to make herself more presentable, using the basin of water and cloth that someone had left on the dresser. Her dress was beyond saving, torn and stained beyond any hope of repair, but she did her best to wash her face and hands and braid her long, dark hair. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she found Zach standing at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He looked up when she entered, and she thought she saw relief flash across his face before his usual calm expression returned. "You slept for almost 15 hours, he said. "I was beginning to wonder if I should check on you, but I figured rest was what you needed most." 15 hours, Nora repeated, shocked. "I have never slept that long in my life." "Your body was at the end of its strength. Sit down. This stew should be ready." She sat at the table and watched as he ladled thick, hearty stew into 2 bowls. It had venison, potatoes, carrots, and herbs that made her mouth water. When he set the bowl in front of her along with fresh bread, she had to stop herself from crying again at this simple kindness. They ate in silence for a while, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Zach seemed like a man who did not waste words, who spoke only when he had something worth saying. Nora found it refreshing after years of dealing with men who loved the sound of their own voices. "Tell me what happened," Zach said finally, pushing his empty bowl aside. "Start from the beginning." So Nora told him everything. She explained about her parents' death, about taking the job as a bookkeeper at the mining office in Virginia City, about discovering that someone was skimming from the payroll. She told him how she had been working late one night when she overheard the mine foreman and several other men discussing their scheme, how they planned to blame the missing money on the mine owner, and then buy the operation for pennies when he went bankrupt. She told him how they had seen her leaving the office and realized she must have heard everything. "I ran that very night," Nora said, her voice shaking slightly at the memory. "I knew they would kill me rather than risk exposure. I took my horse and what little money I had and headed for California, hoping to disappear. But they sent men after me, 6 of them. I recognized 2 from the mine, men who had always seemed decent enough. I suppose money changes people." "Money reveals what was always there," Zach said quietly. "Decent men do not become killers for profit. They were always capable of it, they just needed an excuse. Well, thanks to you, I am free of them now, or at least free of those 6. I suppose the men who sent them will just send more." "I do not think so. The message I sent back was very clear. It would cost them more in men and money to chase you than it would be worth. And without evidence, you are just a woman with a story. Your word against theirs would not hold up in any court, especially not with the money and influence they likely have." Nora felt her heart sink. "So I went through all of this for nothing. They will get away with what they are doing." "I did not say that." Zach leaned back in his chair, studying her with those calm gray eyes. "I said they will not chase you anymore. What you do with what you know, that is up to you. But it will require planning and help from people with more authority than a woman running for her life has." "What do you mean?" "There are territorial marshals who handle crimes that cross state lines. There are federal investigators who look into mining fraud. If you had evidence, real evidence, they might listen. But going back to Virginia City would be suicide." Nora nodded slowly, understanding. "The ledgers, the actual account books, they show everything, all the discrepancies, but they are locked in the office safe." "Then we need to think of another way." Zach stood and moved to add wood to the fire. "But not tonight. Tonight you are safe and fed and alive. Tomorrow we can make plans." "Why are you helping me?" Nora asked suddenly. "You have done more than enough already. You could send me to the nearest town and be done with it. Why do you care what happens to me?" Zach was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had heard it before. 5 years ago, I had a sister. She was 19, beautiful, full of life. She witnessed a crime in Denver, a murder behind a saloon. She tried to do the right thing, tried to go to the law. But the killer was the son of a wealthy businessman, and no one wanted to listen to a girl from a poor family. He sent men after her, just like they sent men after you. But my sister had no one to help her. I was working a cattle drive in Texas when it happened. By the time I got the news and made it back to Denver, she was already dead. They found her body in an alley and ruled it an accident, even though everyone knew the truth. Nora felt tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry. That is horrible. I swore that day that if I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, I would not fail again. I left Denver and came out here to the mountains, trying to outrun the memory. And then you stumbled into my territory, running for your life from men who would kill you for knowing the truth. So you see, I am not helping you for noble reasons. I am helping you because I could not save my sister, and maybe this is my chance to make that right, even if it is too late for her. The raw pain in his voice broke something open in Nora's chest. She stood and moved closer to him, wanting to offer comfort but not knowing how. Your sister would be proud of what you did today. You saved my life. That matters, Zach. It matters more than you know. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Nora felt something shift between them. It was not just gratitude she felt, she realized. There was something else, something deeper and more complicated. This man, this quiet, capable stranger, had become important to her in ways that went beyond simple rescue. You should get more rest, Zach said, but he did not move away from her. Tomorrow will be a long day. We need to figure out your next steps. Will you tell me about her? Nora asked softly. About your sister. I would like to know about her. So they sat by the fire and Zach talked, slowly at first and then with more ease, about a girl named Sarah who loved to sing and who could make anyone laugh, who had dreams of becoming a teacher and who saw the good in everyone. Nora listened and asked questions, and somewhere in that conversation, she saw past the hard exterior to the man beneath, someone who had been wounded deeply and who had chosen isolation rather than risk being hurt again. The days that followed fell into a pattern that felt both strange and natural. Nora helped around the cabin, cooking and cleaning and tending the garden while Zach checked his trap lines and hunted game. He brought her clothes from Independence, simple dresses and proper boots, refusing to say where he had gotten the money for them. She suspected he had sold several valuable pelts to afford them, but he brushed off her thanks with his usual quiet stoicism. They talked more each evening, sharing stories of their lives before fate brought them together in these mountains. Nora learned that Zach was 27, that he had fought in range wars and worked as a scout before retreating to his isolated cabin. He learned that she had taught herself to read advanced mathematics from her father's books, that she had once dreamed of attending a women's college back east, but poverty had made that impossible. You are brilliant, Zach said one evening, genuine admiration in his voice as she explained a complex calculation she had used to track the theft pattern in the mining accounts. Most men I know cannot figure simple arithmetic. You could teach at a university if they would let women do such things. Maybe someday they will, Nora replied with a sad smile. But for now, I am just a woman who knows too much and has nowhere to go. You have somewhere to go. The words came out more forcefully than Zach seemed to intend. He cleared his throat and continued more softly. You can stay here as long as you need. I meant what I said about keeping you safe. I cannot stay here forever, Zach. People would talk. A woman living with a man, unmarried, alone in the mountains. My reputation would be destroyed. Do you care about that? About what small-minded people in town might say? Nora thought about it. A month ago, she would have said yes, that reputation was everything for a woman. But after what she had been through, After seeing men she thought decent reveal themselves as murderers, after being saved by a man who society would call a recluse and a loner, she found those old concerns seem trivial. "No," she said slowly. "I suppose I do not care as much as I thought I did. But still, I cannot impose on your hospitality forever. You did not ask for a house guest, certainly not one who brings danger to your door. The danger is handled. Those men will not be back." Zach paused, seeming to struggle with something. "And maybe I do not mind the company as much as I thought I would. This cabin has been too quiet for too long." Something in the way he said it made Nora's heart beat faster. She had been trying not to think about the way she felt when he was near, the way her pulse raced when their hands accidentally touched, the way she caught herself watching him when he worked, admiring the strength in his movements and the capable way he handled everything from splitting wood to cooking meals. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Somewhere between being rescued and sharing quiet evenings by the fire, between learning his story and seeing his kindness, she had fallen completely in love with Zachariah Jenkins. The problem was, she had no idea if he felt the same way. 3 weeks after her arrival at the cabin, everything changed. They were working together in the garden, harvesting vegetables for storage when Zach suddenly went still. His hand moved to the rifle he always kept nearby, and his eyes scanned the tree line with the intensity of a predator sensing danger. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Now." Nora did not argue. She moved quickly to the cabin and grabbed the pistol he had taught her to shoot, just in case. Through the window, she watched as a lone rider emerged from the trees, hands held high in the universal gesture of peace. She recognized him immediately. Marshal Thomas Wade, a territorial marshal she had seen a few times in Virginia City. He was an honest man, one of the few in that corrupt town, but she had not thought he would care enough to investigate her claims. Zach kept his rifle ready but did not aim it as the marshal approached. Nora watched them talk, saw the marshal gesture toward the cabin, saw Zach's reluctant nod. Then both men were walking toward the house. She opened the door before they could knock. "Marshal Wade, I did not expect to see you out here." The marshal was a man in his 50s, weathered and tough, with eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Ramsey, I have been looking for you for 3 weeks. There are a lot of people asking questions about your whereabouts." "The people asking are the ones who tried to kill her," Zach said flatly. "She has nothing to say to them. I am not here for them." Marshal Wade looked between them, his expression thoughtful. "I am here because a week after you disappeared, the mine owner in Virginia City came to my office. Seems his bookkeeper vanished, and shortly after, he discovered some irregularities in his accounts. He started investigating on his own and did not like what he found. When he tried to confront his foreman about it, someone took a shot at him. That got my attention." Nora felt hope surge in her chest. "He believes me about the theft. He does not know about you specifically, but he knows something is wrong. I have been investigating quietly, and what I have found matches what you saw, but I need proof, real evidence, and I need your testimony." "The ledgers," Nora said immediately. "The original account books, they are in the office safe and they show everything, but I cannot go back there, Marshal. They will kill me before I can say a word. I know. That is why I am here. I have a plan, but it will require courage and careful timing." He looked at Zach. "And it will require your help, Jenkins. I know who you are. I know you rode with the Texas Rangers before you came out here. I need a man with your skills." Zach's expression was unreadable. "What exactly are you proposing?" What followed was an hour of intense planning. Marshal Wade explained that he had warrants prepared for the arrest of the foreman and 3 other men involved in the scheme. But he needed the account books and Nora's testimony to make the charges stick. He proposed that he and Zach would ride to Virginia City together, with Nora hidden safely nearby. They would raid the mining office at night, retrieve the ledgers, and then Nora would give her testimony before a circuit judge who was known to be incorruptible. "It is dangerous," the marshal admitted. "These men have already killed to protect their secret. They will not hesitate to kill again." "Then we make sure they do not get the chance," Zach said quietly. He looked at Nora, and she saw concern in his eyes. "But I do not like putting you at risk again." "I am already at risk," Nora replied firmly, "and I will not let those men get away with what they did just because I am afraid. Your sister did not get justice, Zach, but maybe I can. Maybe this is why all of this happened, so I could be the one to stop them." Something in her words seemed to reach him. He nodded slowly. "Then we do this right. No more running. We end it." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Marshal Wade stayed at the cabin, going over every detail of the plan until they could recite it in their sleep. Zach taught Nora more about shooting, making sure she could defend herself if something went wrong. And in the quiet moments when the marshal had gone to sleep and they sat together by the fire, Nora and Zach talked about what would happen after. "If this works, you could go anywhere," Zach said on the night before they were set to leave. "You would be safe. You could build a new life wherever you wanted." "What if I wanted to build a life here?" The words came out before Nora could stop them. "What if I did not want to leave?" Zach looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "These mountains are not an easy place to live. It is isolated and harsh, especially in winter. There are no fine dresses or social gatherings, no opportunities for a woman with your intelligence. You think that is what I want? After everything I have been through?" Nora leaned forward, her heart pounding. "I have seen what so-called civilization has to offer, Zach. I have seen greed and corruption and men who value money over human life. But here, in these mountains, I have seen something different. I have seen honor and courage and kindness. I have seen a man who would risk his life for a stranger, who keeps his word, who lives by a code that means something. Do you really think I would choose a fancy dress and empty social calls over that, Nora?" His voice was rough with emotion. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying. I am saying that I love you, Zachariah Jenkins. I am saying that these past weeks have been the happiest of my life, even with the danger and uncertainty. I am saying that, when I think about my future, the only place I want to be is right here with you." For a long moment he just stared at her. Then, with a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, he pulled her into his arms. His kiss was everything she had been dreaming about and more, fierce and gentle and full of longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I loved you from the moment I saw you hiding behind that tree, terrified but not broken," he whispered. "I tried to tell myself it was just guilt about Sarah, just a need to save someone after I failed to save her. But it is more than that, Nora. It is so much more. You are brave and brilliant and beautiful, and I do not deserve you, but if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You are already worthy," Nora said through happy tears. "You have always been worthy." They kissed again, and this time it was slower, deeper, a promise of the future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling despite the dangerous mission that awaited them. "When this is over," Zach said softly, "when you are truly safe and free, I am going to ask you to marry me properly. I am going to take you to Independence and buy you a ring and do it right." "When this is over," Nora replied, "I am going to say yes before you even finish asking." The journey to Virginia City took 3 days. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads and staying alert for any signs of danger. Marshal Wade proved to be excellent company, with a dry sense of humor that kept spirits up even in tense moments. He also made it clear that he noticed the change between Nora and Zach, and he approved. "About time someone made Jenkins smile," the marshal said one evening. "I was beginning to think he had forgotten how." They reached the outskirts of Virginia City on a moonless night, which was exactly what they had hoped for. The plan was simple, but risky. Marshal Wade would use his authority to demand access to the mining office, claiming he had questions about payroll records. Zach would be with him as a deputy, a legal position the marshal had the authority to grant temporarily. While they kept the night watchman busy, Nora would slip in through a back window that she knew was sometimes left unlocked and retrieve the ledgers from the safe. She knew the combination because she had been the one who said it originally. Everything went smoothly at first. Nora watched from the shadows as the marshal and Zach approached the office. She saw the watchman come out, saw the conversation begin. Then she moved quickly and quietly to the back window. It was unlocked, just as she remembered. She slipped inside the dark office, her heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear it. The safe was exactly where she remembered, behind a painting on the wall. Her hands shook as she worked the combination, certain that at any moment someone would burst in and catch her. But the safe opened with a soft click, and there they were, the ledgers. All the evidence needed to prove the theft and fraud. She was tucking them into the bag she had brought when she heard voices outside. Angry voices. More than just the watchman. Through the window, she saw that the foreman had arrived with two other men. They had guns drawn and were facing off against Marshal Wade and Zach. Her blood ran cold as she realized their plan had been discovered somehow. They had walked into a trap. Nora did not think. She grabbed the ledgers and moved to the office door. She had the pistol Zach had given her, and she knew how to use it. These men would not hurt anyone else she cared about. She would die before she let that happen. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard gunshots. 2 shots close together, then a scream. She threw open the door and ran outside, fear giving her courage she did not know she possessed. The scene was chaos. The foreman was on the ground, clutching his shoulder. One of the other men was unconscious. The third was running, disappearing into the darkness. Marshal Wade was standing with his gun drawn, looking grim but unhurt. And Zach was there, also standing, his own weapon still holstered. "It is over," the marshal said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "The circuit judge arrived yesterday. He has already heard testimony from the mine owner about attempts on his life and suspicious deaths of workers who asked too many questions. With these ledgers and Miss Ramsey's testimony, we have everything we need." The foreman looked up from the ground, his face twisted with hatred and pain. "You think you have won. You think this changes anything. We have connections, we have money, we will walk away from this. Not this time." A new voice spoke from the darkness. An older man stepped into the lamplight, distinguished and stern. "I am Judge Harrison, and I have been listening to everything you just said. That, along with attempted murder of a territorial marshal and threatening a witness, should ensure you spend the rest of your days in prison, even if the theft charges somehow failed to stick." The foreman's face went pale. It was truly over. The next few days passed in a blur of official statements and court proceedings. Judge Harrison was indeed incorruptible, and he listened carefully to Nora's testimony. The ledgers provided all the evidence needed, showing a clear pattern of theft over 18 months totaling thousands of dollars. The 2 men who had fled when Zach shot their companions in the mountains were found and arrested. They turned on their employers immediately, providing additional testimony in exchange for lighter sentences. The mine owner, a decent man named Mr. Patterson who had been devastated to learn about the corruption in his operation, offered Nora a substantial reward for exposing the fraud. It was enough money to start a new life, to live comfortably for years. "I do not need a reward for telling the truth," Nora said, but Mr. Patterson insisted. "You risked your life, Miss Ramsey. You saved my business and possibly my life as well. Please take it. Consider it back payment for all the work you did and compensation for what you suffered." In the end, she accepted, knowing the money would help her and Zach build the future they wanted. Marshal Wade came to see them off when they were ready to leave Virginia City. "You two take care of each other," he said, shaking Zach's hand and then surprising Nora with a fatherly hug. "Jenkins, you are a good man. Do not let your past make you forget that. And Miss Ramsey, you are one of the bravest people I have ever met. I am honored to know you." "Thank you, Marshal," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything. If you had not come when you did, I do not know what would have happened. I was just doing my job. You two did the hard part." He tipped his hat and stepped back. "Now get out of here and go live your life. You have earned it." They rode back to the mountains together, just the two of them this time. The journey was peaceful, without the tension and fear that had colored their trip to Virginia City. They talked about plans for the future, about expanding the cabin and maybe raising horses. Nora mentioned that she might be able to get work doing bookkeeping for businesses in Independence, riding into town once or twice a week. Zach suggested she could also tutor children who wanted to learn mathematics and reading. "You would be an amazing teacher," he said. "You have patience and knowledge, and you explain things in a way that makes sense. You think people would send their children to learn from a woman living unmarried in the mountains?" Nora teased. "They will after we get married," Zach replied, so seriously that she laughed. "Is that a proposal, Zachariah Jenkins?" "No, when I propose, you will know it." But he was smiling, that rare, beautiful smile that made her heart flip in her chest. They reached Independence, California 3 days later. It was a small town nestled in the Owens Valley, with the Sierra Nevada mountains towering to the west. The town had grown up around the mining and ranching industries, but it was quieter and more peaceful than the rough camps to the north. The people here were hard-working and honest, the kind of community where neighbors helped each other and kept their word. Zach rode directly to the small church at the edge of town. The pastor, an elderly man named Reverend Matthews, looked surprised but pleased to see him. "Zachariah Jenkins, as I live and breathe," the Reverend said. "I have not seen you in town for months. What brings you here today?" "I need your help, Reverend." Zach dismounted and helped Nora down, keeping her hand in his. "I need to buy a ring, and then I need you to perform a wedding. Soon." The Reverend's eyebrows shot up. He looked at Nora, taking in her simple dress and wind-blown hair, and his face broke into a wide smile. "Well now, this is wonderful news. Let me get my wife. She will know where you can find a proper ring." What followed was a whirlwind that left Nora breathless and laughing. Mrs. Matthews, a plump, cheerful woman, took charge immediately. She knew that the general store had a small selection of rings, and she marched them there with the determination of a general leading troops. The store owner, delighted to hear about an impending wedding, brought out his entire collection. Nora tried to protest that they did not need anything fancy, but Zach was hearing none of it. He selected a simple gold band with a small but beautiful diamond, and the look on his face when he slipped it onto her finger made her forget every objection. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect," he replied, and kissed her right there in the general store, making Mrs. Matthews giggle like a girl. They were married 2 days later in the small church, with Reverend and Mrs. Matthews as witnesses. Nora wore a dress that Mrs. Matthews had insisted on lending her, a beautiful blue that brought out her eyes. Zach wore his best clothes, his dark hair neatly combed and his jaw freshly shaved. He looked so handsome that Nora could hardly believe this was real, that this man was about to become her husband. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and Zach kissed her with such tenderness and joy, Nora felt tears streaming down her face. These were not tears of fear or pain like she had cried so many times in recent months. These were tears of pure happiness, of a future full of love and promise stretching out before them. They spent their wedding night at the small hotel in Independence, the proprietor giving them his best room with a smile and congratulations. It was the first time they had truly been alone together as husband and wife, and Nora was nervous but not afraid. Zach was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Their coming together was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them through danger and adversity. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Nora felt a peace she had never known before. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Zach's hand stroked through her hair, the gesture protective and loving. "For saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." "I should be thanking you," he replied softly. "You brought me back to life, Nora. I was just existing in those mountains, hiding from the world and my own grief. You reminded me what it means to care about someone, to have something worth fighting for. You gave me hope again." They returned to the cabin the next day, and Nora was surprised by how much it felt like coming home. Over the following weeks and months, they worked together to make the place truly theirs. Zach built an extension onto the cabin, creating a proper bedroom and a small room that could serve as an office for Nora's bookkeeping work. She planted more in the garden and started preserving food for the winter ahead. Word spread through the area that Zach Jenkins had a wife who was brilliant with numbers, and soon Nora had more work than she could handle. Ranchers and small business owners came to her for help with their accounts, and she discovered she loved the work. She also started tutoring 3 children from a neighboring ranch, teaching them reading and mathematics twice a week. The first winter in their cabin was hard but wonderful. The snow fell deep in the mountains, sometimes keeping them isolated for days at a time. But Nora did not mind. Those long, quiet days and nights with Zach were precious, filled with conversation and laughter and love. They read books together by the fire, cooked meals side by side, and made plans for the future. In the spring, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She told Zach one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction. She need not have worried. His face lit up with such pure joy that she found herself laughing and crying at the same time as he swept her into his arms. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I love you, Nora. I love you both. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are both safe and happy and loved." Their son was born in early winter, delivered with the help of Mrs. Matthews and a midwife from Independence. It was a long, difficult labor, but when Nora finally held her baby boy in her arms, she knew every moment of pain had been worth it. He had dark hair like his mother and gray eyes like his father, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They named him Samuel, after Nora's father. Zach held his son with such careful tenderness, tears streaming unashamed down his face, and Nora fell in love with him all over again watching him become a father. "He is perfect," Zach whispered. "Just perfect, like his mother." Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to love the mountain life as much as his parents. As he grew into a toddler, he followed Zach everywhere, trying to imitate his father's every move. Nora would watch them together, her heart full to bursting, and thank whatever fate had led her to these mountains and into Zach's arms. 2 years after Samuel was born, they had a daughter. They named her Sarah, for Zach's sister. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's calm demeanor, and she was beloved from the moment she entered the world. "I wish my sister could have met her namesake," Zach said one night, holding baby Sarah while Samuel slept nearby. "I wish she could have seen how happy we are." "Maybe she knows," Nora said softly. "Maybe she is watching and smiling, knowing that her story helped save mine, that her memory brought us together. I like to think so." Zach looked at his wife and his children, his family, his whole world. "I like to think she would be proud of how things turned out." The years passed in a blur of happiness. Samuel grew into a strong, thoughtful boy who loved the mountains and could track game almost as well as his father by the time he was 10. Sarah was brilliant like her mother, reading advanced books by age 8 and helping with the bookkeeping work. 2 more children joined the family, a son named Thomas and another daughter named Emma, and the cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family. Nora continued her bookkeeping work and tutoring, becoming known throughout the region as a woman of intelligence and integrity. Zach remained a quiet, steady presence, a man of few words but deep feeling, respected by everyone who knew him. Together, they built a life that was rich in love if not in material wealth, raising their children with values of honesty, courage, and compassion. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Nora and Zach would sit together on their porch and look out at the mountains that had brought them together. They would remember those desperate days when she had been running for her life, when 6 men had been hunting her through these very forests. They would remember the gunshots that had saved her, the warning that had sent 2 men fleeing, and the beginning of a love story neither of them had expected. "You ever regret it?" Zach asked one such evening. "The life you could have had if things had been different?" "Education, opportunities, a place in society." "Never," Nora replied without hesitation. "This life, here with you, raising our children in these mountains, this is everything I ever wanted. I just did not know it until I found you." "I was half alive before you came into my world," Zach said, pulling her close. "You saved me just as much as I saved you that day." "We saved each other," Nora corrected softly. "That is what love does." They kissed as the sun set over the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, their children slept safely in the cabin they had built together. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the wind moved through the pine trees with a sound like gentle music. It had been 15 years since that desperate day when Nora Ramsey had been running for her life through these mountains. 15 years since Zachariah Jenkins had made the decision to intervene, to shoot 4 men and send 2 running with a warning, to save a stranger who would become the love of his life. Those gunshots had changed everything, had set in motion a series of events that led to this moment, this life, this family. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, hands intertwined and hearts full, both Nora and Zach knew they would not change a single moment of their journey. The fear and danger and uncertainty had been real, but so was the love that had grown from it. So was the family they had created. So was the life they had built in these wild, beautiful mountains, and in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other against impossible odds, had fought for their chance at happiness, and had created something beautiful and lasting. Their children would grow up strong and loved, would carry on the values their parents had taught them, would remember the story of how their mother and father met and fell in love in the wilderness. Inside the cabin, baby Emma started to cry softly. Nora rose to tend to her, but Zach gently held her back. "I will get her. You sit and enjoy the evening." She watched him go inside, this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully. Through the window, she could see him lift Emma gently from her cradle, see him rock her and whisper soft words until she quieted. Samuel stirred in his bed, and Zach tucked the blanket more securely around him. Sarah had kicked off her covers, and he carefully replaced them. Thomas was snoring softly, completely at peace. Nora felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. This was her life now. This was her family. These mountains that had once been a place of terror were now her home, her sanctuary, the place where she had found love and purpose and belonging. Zach returned to the porch and sat beside her again, pulling her into his arms. "Everyone is asleep again. All is well." "All is well," Nora agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over Nora when she fled through these mountains in terror now watched over her as she sat in peace with the man she loved. The same wilderness that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her everything worth living for. "I love you," Zach said quietly, as he did every night. "I love you too," Nora replied, as she did every night, and in that simple exchange, repeated countless times over the years they had been together, lay the foundation of everything they had built: love, trust, commitment, partnership. The gunshots that had brought them together were long silent, but their echoes had shaped everything that came after. 4 men had paid with their lives for threatening an innocent woman. 2 had fled with a warning burned into their memories. And 1 woman and 1 man had found each other in the aftermath, had chosen each other, had built a life together that was richer and fuller than either had dreamed possible. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, they finally went inside, closing the door on another day in their remarkable life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. Their children would grow and change. Their love would deepen and mature. Life would continue in all its beautiful complexity. But tonight, surrounded by their sleeping children in the cabin they had built with their own hands, Nora and Zachariah Jenkins simply held each other close and thanked whatever forces of fate had brought them together. The past was behind them, full of pain and loss, but also courage and survival. The future stretched ahead, bright with promise and possibility, and the present, this perfect moment, was all they needed. They had each other, they had their family, they had their home in the mountains. They had taken something that started in violence and fear and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. They had survived. They had thrived. They had loved. And in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the 1870s, Sierra Nevada, in a time when life was hard and justice was uncertain, that was no small miracle. It was everything.